My name is Blake, I'm 36, and I work in cybersecurity, so I know suspicious behavior when I see it. Today I caught Melissa holding my wallet again, just like she'd been doing for almost a month, checking my cards, looking at bank statements when she thought I wasn't watching. When I said, "You're checking my credit cards again, aren't you?" she froze, and the look on her face wasn't guilt or embarrassment, it was calculation. She tried to smile it off and claim she was just looking for a hardware store receipt, but I knew better. We live in Austin in a condo we can barely afford because she's constantly trying to match her friend Sarah's luxury lifestyle while we're budgeting for basic camping trips. I've spent 11 years at Phoenix Security Solutions catching electronic thieves, so I recognize the signs. I just stared at her and said, "Hardware receipts are in the desk drawer." Same place they've always been. She put my wallet back, but not the way it was before, and in my line of work, tiny changes matter. I've spent years investigating financial fraud, corporate theft, identity scams, employee schemes, and the pattern is always the same. Someone gets access, starts small, then grows bold. Melissa walked upstairs saying she was calling her sister about Thanksgiving, and as soon as she was gone, I checked my wallet. Everything looked normal, but looking normal doesn't mean safe. She'd been touching my cards, memorizing numbers, studying security codes, and I knew how that story usually ends because I've seen it destroy marriages before. So I went to my office, opened the same fraud monitoring software I use for client demonstrations, and prepared for whoever might try to get into my accounts. That night, I created a trap, a bait card linked to an account with $60,000, fully monitored with GPS, transaction logs, merchant details, and timestamps, enough to track every move and build a case if someone decided to cross the line. I put the bait card where my real debit card normally stayed, and 4 days later it was gone. I met Melissa 6 years ago at a tech conference. She was finishing her business degree and working at a luxury watch store, smart, ambitious, and fascinated by financial security. She used to say my job was like being a detective for money crimes, and back then her interest felt real. She asked detailed questions about fraud detection and tracking systems, and I even showed her case studies and demo tools, not realizing I was basically training someone who might use that knowledge against me. We got married 4 years later, kept the ceremony small because my salary at Phoenix Security couldn't fund the kind of luxury event her friend Sarah had. Sarah married a crypto entrepreneur, lived in a lakefront house, took European vacations, bought designer bags, and Melissa's comparisons started quietly but consistently, making it obvious she felt we weren't keeping up. I picked up freelance security work to help financially, working late nights to bring in extra income, but it still didn't match the lifestyle she wanted. Melissa picked up more hours at the watch store, yet her checks kept shrinking. She claimed commissions were cut, and I believed her at the time, but now I'm not so sure. The warning signs had been there for weeks. Questions about my travel schedule, meetings, and how banking security detects suspicious spending, all disguised as casual curiosity, but I knew it was reconnaissance. About a month ago, she started checking my wallet when I was distracted, offering excuses like looking for receipts or business cards I didn't even keep, and I didn't confront her because I needed proof, not assumptions. The morning the bait card disappeared, everything looked normal. She made pancakes, talked about meeting Sarah for lunch, said it wouldn't be expensive, and kissed me goodbye like nothing was happening. After she left, I checked the monitoring system and saw the card was active. The first alert hit at 10:47 a.m., an $800 charge at an upscale boutique she'd mentioned before, a luxury handbag place that needed appointments. While I was in a client meeting, my phone buzzed again, and stepping outside I saw the details. The same store, another charge, this time $3,000, and that was when it became clear the line had been crossed. By lunch she'd spent $12,000 on luxury items, handbags, shoes, jewelry, each charge logged with GPS and timestamps, proving this wasn't impulse spending but something planned. Then came a $6,000 travel purchase, business class tickets to London leaving the next morning, complete with passenger details. I checked our joint accounts when I got home. She hadn't touched them, which was smart, because shared money is harder to justify, but the bait card was tied to an account she didn't know I used for monitoring. That evening she acted completely normal, cooked dinner, talked about shopping with Sarah, and packed a suitcase, saying Sarah invited her to a last-minute wellness retreat and she'd be gone through the weekend. I helped her load the car, watched her leave, and 25 minutes later an alert confirmed she was at the long-term airport parking lot, not a retreat. At 4 a.m., my phone lit up with a flood of notifications. Transaction after transaction came in from London, hotels, restaurants, high-end shopping, while I sat in our Austin condo watching a European vacation get funded in real time with the bait card she thought she'd stolen. She believed she was taking my money, but all she was really doing was building a digital trail that proved everything. I made coffee and let the system work. 11 years in fraud investigation taught me patience, and solid evidence is what holds up in court. By the end of the week, she'd burned through nearly $50,000, and every charge was logged by multiple networks: my personal monitoring system, Phoenix Security's infrastructure, and international tracking protocols. By Wednesday, her spending had triggered automatic reviews for suspicious international activity and potential money laundering, the kind of pattern that flags high-risk behavior: first-class flights on a previously dormant card, luxury purchases totaling tens of thousands. By Thursday, the fallout hit. I got a call from Agent Lisa Chen at the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, an agency I've worked with before, telling me they detected unusual activity and the pattern suggested unauthorized use. I told her I knew and explained it was part of a personal investigation because someone close to me had been accessing financial accounts without permission, so I set up a system to track and record the fraud. After a long pause, she asked if I was running a sting operation on someone in my own household, and I clarified that I was documenting unauthorized access to money the person believed they were taking unnoticed. When asked how much was involved, I said about $4,000 to $7,000, all clearly traced to accounts the person was never allowed to use. She warned me that this had crossed into a much bigger issue, since international transactions over $50,000 automatically trigger money laundering alerts, and authorities in the UK and immigration services were already involved, with the passport flagged for extra screening. As I reviewed the transaction logs, it became clear that what started as theft had turned into an international financial investigation, and when I asked what would happen if she tried to return home, the answer was simple: enhanced customs screening. Agent Chen explained that if she couldn't prove a legal source for the money, the situation would escalate fast, but what she said next completely reshaped my understanding of Melissa's betrayal. She told me they had been tracking my wife's transactions across multiple systems and that this wasn't her first time using stolen financial information to travel internationally. When I asked what she meant, she said they found matching spending patterns going back 14 months, using different cards and accounts but showing the same habits: luxury trips, expensive shopping, and first-class travel. I was stunned, because Melissa had never traveled abroad without me, yet the records showed 3 earlier European trips to Paris, Barcelona, and Amsterdam, all paid for with accounts she wasn't authorized to use. As the reality set in and my head spun, she added that the money appeared to come from several sources, possibly including her employer, former roommates, and even family members. And later that evening Melissa called me from London, clearly at an upscale restaurant, cheerfully saying she was having an amazing time. She kept talking about how Sarah knew all the best spots, how they were shopping and eating at incredible places, and I froze because she had just admitted being in London when she was supposed to be at a local retreat. When I carefully asked if she said London, there was silence followed by forced laughter, and she quickly claimed the retreat had a European theme with classical music and staff with accents, saying it felt like London without leaving Texas. She brushed it off as normal for high-end places, mentioned finding a boutique in the gift shop, and said she bought me something special, but after the call I checked the logs and saw 3 more charges that night: $2,000 at a restaurant, $1,500 at a wine shop, and $4,000 at a jewelry store on Bond Street. The next morning Agent Chen called and said we needed to meet in person because the case had grown beyond personal fraud, so I drove to the federal building in downtown Austin where she showed me rooms full of documents and transaction data and explained that my wife's spending had triggered investigations in the UK, France, and the US, with a scale, luxury focus, and sudden travel pointing to possible money laundering or organized financial crime, even as I insisted it wasn't organized crime. I said it wasn't organized crime but personal betrayal, and she told me she understood, yet explained that motives don't matter when the evidence shows a clear pattern and a solid paper trail. She then asked if everything was okay and said she needed to clarify Melissa's trips, the retreats, and shopping outings, asking how many we had actually taken together, and after a long pause she admitted she hadn't traveled with Melissa in over a year, only meeting her for coffee once. In that moment everything clicked, and I realized Melissa had been using Sarah as cover, turning every so-called retreat into a solo spending spree paid for with stolen money. Later that afternoon Agent Chen called again and said they had confirmed at least 6 unauthorized accounts, including her employer's corporate card, her sister's personal accounts, and cards from former co-workers, showing a deliberate pattern of collecting financial information to support a luxury lifestyle. When I asked how she got access, she explained that Melissa had been photographing cards, memorizing details, and using her job at the watch store to access customer payment information, which made perfect sense given the wealthy clientele. And that evening when I searched her things, I found a hidden notebook in her jewelry box filled with credit card numbers, expiration dates, security codes, and names I didn't recognize. She texted that she couldn't wait to show me everything, and 20 minutes later Agent Chen called to say Melissa was in secondary inspection, where customs officers found over $35,000 in luxury items in her luggage, including designer bags, jewelry, and expensive clothing. When questioned about the money, Melissa claimed I had approved her using my credit card, and Chen asked if I was ready to make a statement. Looking at the logs showing $49,700 in unauthorized charges, years of stolen financial data, and a notebook filled with other people's card numbers, I told them clearly that I never approved any spending and that she accessed financial information without permission to fund travel and luxury purchases. Chen confirmed this matched their findings and added that Melissa was also carrying a second set of credit cards that didn't belong to anyone in my household, clearly tied to the stolen information in her notebook. Even on the flight home, she had been carrying evidence, and at 8:45 Chen called again to tell me Melissa had been arrested on charges of credit card fraud, identity theft, and international money laundering, with the monitoring data and stolen cards giving federal prosecutors a strong case. I asked what would happen next and was told she would remain in federal custody until arraignment, facing serious prison time due to the international scope and planning involved, and at 9:30 Melissa called from an unknown number saying it was her one allowed call and begging me to come to the airport and clear up what she called a misunderstanding. When I asked what she meant, she said authorities believed she stole money and insisted I had given her permission to use my card, asking me to confirm it so we could go home. Staring at the logs showing $49,700 in unauthorized charges, years of stolen financial data, and a notebook full of other people's credit card numbers, I told her plainly that I never approved any of it. After a long silence, she pleaded again, saying she could explain, and I told her to save that for her lawyer before hanging up and turning off my phone. The house felt quiet in a way it hadn't for years, and on Tuesday morning I sat in the federal courthouse as Melissa was brought in wearing an orange jumpsuit and handcuffs, looking far smaller than the woman who had spent nearly $50,000 on luxury goods in London. The prosecutor read the charges aloud: credit card fraud, identity theft, international money laundering, and conspiracy, each carrying years of potential prison time, and stated that Melissa had operated a sophisticated criminal scheme lasting more than 14 months. She was found to have accessed multiple people's financial information, used it to pay for luxury international travel, and tried to hide it through deliberate deception. In court, her attorney asked for bail, saying she was a first-time offender with community ties, but the prosecution countered with proof of how far-reaching the crimes were: international charges, stolen funds, and clear planning. They argued she was a flight risk who had already shown she could use financial systems to her advantage and appeared to be preparing for more. The judge reviewed everything: the notebook full of stolen card data, the transaction logs from my monitoring system, and the pattern of her activity. His decision was direct. Given the scale, planning, and international nature of the fraud, she was considered both a flight risk and a danger to the community. Bail was denied. Melissa glanced back at me as officers escorted her out, and I stayed still. Outside, Agent Chen gave me a folder and explained the $50,000 from the bait account would be returned within 30 days, and that international teams were tracking funds stolen from other victims. I went home to an empty house and immediately changed every password, account number, and piece of information Melissa ever had access to. For months later, she pleaded guilty because the evidence was impossible to deny: the transaction logs from my monitoring system, the notebook of stolen card numbers, and statements from victims who unknowingly paid for her European trips. She was sentenced to 96 months in federal prison, followed by 36 months of supervised release, and ordered to pay over $350,000 in restitution for everything she stole over 14 months. The watch store where she worked was investigated as well, and the owner discovered she'd been secretly photographing customer credit cards during transactions to collect financial data from wealthy clients. For more victims came forward, all customers from the watch store who later found unauthorized charges on their cards, and even Sarah called after the sentencing saying she had no idea what Melissa was really doing, admitting Melissa lied to both of us about their travels. All I could tell her was to remember that some people aren't who they pretend to be. 8 months later, I left the Austin house because it held too many reminders of a life built on lies and took a new job at a cybersecurity firm focused on financial fraud prevention, fitting since the same skills I used to catch criminals were the ones that exposed my own wife. The bait card I set to confirm my suspicions revealed an international operation, proving that sometimes the person closest to you is the one you know the least. After 6 years together, I realized I'd been living with someone who saw me as a paycheck, but her greed took her too far. She tried stealing from someone who catches thieves for a living, and that's what ended her. I may have been the target, but I also became the reason she was caught. And if you like this story about betrayal and how expertise uncovers the truth, hit like, leave a comment, and subscribe for more stories like this.